Black Maid hid her bruises from the Korean Mafia boss. He discovered it was her abusive ex. I didn't just hide a bruise. I hid a war zone. I thought the foundation I plastered onto my cheek was thick enough to fool the devil himself, but I forgot that devils recognize hell when they see it. I learned early on that nobody wants a broken thing cleaning their house, especially not the powerful men who lived in the skyrise tower. But Ryan wasn't just a bad boyfriend. He was a master architect of my pain, and he was waiting for me to come home. If you know that sometimes silence screams the loudest, hit that like button. Subscribe to witness the justice, and drop your location and time in the comments right now, because this rescue is just the beginning of the danger. The wind on the terrace whipped my uniform against my legs, but the cold I felt came from the man standing in front of me. Ju Hyong didn't offer me a handkerchief. He didn't offer me a hug. He offered me a prison sentence disguised as protection. "You are staying here," he had said. It wasn't a question. I stood there, the city lights blurring below us, feeling the terrifying weight of his attention. For months, I had been a ghost in his penthouse, dusting his marble statues and scrubbing his floors. Now he was looking at me like I was a statue that had been chipped. "Sir, I can't," I stammered, my voice cracking. "Ryan, he tracks my phone. If I don't reply by 7, he gets angry. If I don't walk through the door by 8, he breaks things." Ju Hyong extended his hand. The black leather glove creaked softly. "Give me the phone." "What?" "The device," he said, his voice void of any warmth. "It is a leash. Give it to me." My hands shook as I pulled the cracked smartphone from my apron pocket. It was my only connection to the world, but it was also the remote control Ryan used to detonate my life. Ju Hyong took it. He didn't look at the screen. He simply dropped it into the pocket of his expensive slacks, as if it were a piece of trash. "The link is severed," he stated. "You do not have a home to go back to tonight, Tanisha. You have a room here." I wanted to argue. I wanted to run. But the fear of Ryan was paralyzed by the overwhelming authority of this man. He turned and walked back into the glass living room, expecting me to follow. I did. I followed him like a stray dog that had no other choice. He led me past the staff quarters I knew well, down a hallway I had never cleaned. He opened a heavy oak door. Inside was a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. The bed was massive, the sheets white and crisp. It felt cold. It felt sterile. "You will sleep," he ordered, standing in the doorway. "Food will be sent up. Do not leave this wing." "Why are you doing this?" I whispered, clutching my arms. "I'm just the maid." He looked at my cheek, where the makeup had been wiped away to reveal the purple ugliness Ryan had left. His eyes darkened, a flash of something dangerous passing through them. "Because in my house, I control the violence," he said, "and I did not authorize this." He closed the door. The lock clicked. It was a heavy, expensive sound. I sank onto the edge of the bed, trembling. I had escaped a man who beat me for burnt toast, only to land in the grip of a man who treated people like chess pieces. I was safe, yes, but looking at the locked door, I realized I had just traded a cage of rust for a cage of gold. The silence in the guest suite was louder than any screaming match I had ever had with Ryan. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, staring at the digital clock on the bedside table. 7 p.m. Ryan would be texting now. 7:15 p.m. He would be calling. 8 p.m. He would be pacing our small living room, his knuckles cracking, his rage building like a pressure cooker. I flinched when a knock came at the door. It wasn't Ju Hyong. It was one of the security guards I usually saw by the elevator, a wide man with a scar running through his eyebrow. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with professional indifference. "Mr. Ju Hyong ordered your belongings retrieved," he said, his voice gravelly. He stepped aside, and 2 other men carried in 4 large, sleek gray boxes. My breath hitched. "You went to my apartment?" "We secured the assets," the guard replied. Was anyone there?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to know if Ryan had been there, if he had seen them, if he had fought. The guard paused. The apartment was occupied. The occupant was removed from the premises while we worked. He didn't explain what removed meant. He didn't have to. The way he adjusted his cufflinks told me enough. Ryan, the man who terrified me, was nothing to these people. He was an obstacle to be moved so they could pack my clothes. They left as quickly as they arrived, leaving me alone with the boxes. I walked over to them, my hands trembling. I opened the first one. Inside, my cheap clothes were folded with military precision. My worn-out sneakers were wrapped in plastic. My nursing textbooks were stacked neatly in the corner. The scent hit me then, the smell of stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener. It was the smell of the apartment, the smell of fear. But here, in this air-conditioned, sanitized penthouse, the smell felt foreign. It felt like a disease I had brought into a sterile lab. I dug through the box, looking for my hidden cash stash. It was there. But as I pulled out my old hoodie, a piece of paper fluttered to the floor. I froze. It wasn't a piece of paper I had packed. It was a page torn from a notepad, shoved hastily into the hood of the sweatshirt. The handwriting was jagged, angry. I knew that scrawl. I picked it up, my blood turning to ice. You think you can hide in the sky? Gravity works on everyone. Tanisha, I'm coming up. I covered my mouth to stifle a sob. Ryan knew. The guards hadn't scared him off. They had just led him right to me. Pause right there. If you were Tanisha, finding that note in a mafia boss's house, would you run to protect him or stay and trust him? Comment, run, or stay below. I looked at the heavy door. Ju Hyong thought he had solved a problem. He didn't realize he had just invited a monster to his doorstep. And looking at that note, I knew one thing for certain. The silence wasn't peace. It was just the deep breath before the scream. I couldn't just sit there. Idleness was dangerous because it gave my brain too much time to replay the note Ryan had left. The guest suite was beautiful, but it felt like a waiting room for a disaster I couldn't stop. I needed to move. I needed to be useful. That was how I survived Ryan, by being useful. If I was cleaning, I wasn't a target. I found a bucket and a rag in the utility closet. My old uniform was in the wash, so I was wearing a pair of gray sweatpants and a t-shirt the security team had provided. They were too big, hanging off my frame, making me feel small. I went to the hallway, dropped to my knees, and started scrubbing a floor that was already spotless. The rhythm was soothing. Scrub, wipe, repeat. I was so focused on the friction that I didn't hear him approach. What are you doing? Ju Hyung's voice was like a physical weight dropping onto my shoulders. I scrambled up, clutching the wet rag, water dripping onto the marble. I'm earning my keep, sir. I can't just take your charity. He didn't look at my face. He looked at my arm. In my haste to scrub, the oversized sleeve of the t-shirt had slid up past my elbow. It exposed the yellow and green marks shaped like fingers, souvenirs from when Ryan had grabbed me 3 days ago to stop me from leaving the apartment. I quickly yanked the sleeve down, shame burning my neck. I'm sorry. I'll cover it. Ju Hyung took a step closer. He reached out and took the wet rag from my hand. He didn't throw it. He placed it gently on the side table. You do not work in this house anymore, Tanisha. Then what am I? I whispered. If I don't work, I have no value. He stared at me, his dark eyes unreadable, stripping away my defenses without touching me. Your value is not determined by how well you erase dirt. He turned and walked toward the kitchen. Come. I followed, confused. I expected a lecture. Instead, I watched as the most dangerous man in the city rolled up his sleeves, washed his hands, and began to chop vegetables. His movements were terrifyingly precise. The knife hit the board in a rapid, rhythmic staccato. He wasn't doing this to be domestic. He was doing this because he controlled everything in his environment, including what I ate. He slid a plate across the island counter toward me. Eat, he commanded, and let the bruises heal. That is your only job. The next morning, the penthouse wasn't a sanctuary. It was a war room. I woke up thirsty and tried to slip into the kitchen unnoticed, but the open plan layout made hiding impossible. The living area was filled with smoke and men. 5 of them sat around the low glass coffee table, their suits sharp, their faces hard. They were speaking in low, rapid Korean, but the tension was universal. I froze, clutching my water glass. I was an intruder in a shark tank. Ju Hyung sat at the head of the table. He looked relaxed, almost bored, but his eyes were scanning every micro-expression in the room. When I stepped into the light, the conversation stopped abruptly. One of the men, a heavy-set guy with a gold watch that cost more than my life, turned to look at me. His gaze raked over my casual clothes, landing on my face where the bruise was still visible. He smirked, turning back to Ju Hyung. I didn't know you were running a shelter for broken things, Ju Hyung. Is this why the shipment is delayed? You're too busy playing nurse to the help. The room went deadly silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the glass so hard I thought it would shatter. I turned to retreat, to run back to my room and lock the door, But Ju Hyung's voice stopped me. Stay. It wasn't shouted. It was spoken with a terrifying calm. Ju Hyung stood up. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at the man who had spoken. He walked around the table, his footsteps silent on the rug. He stopped behind the man's chair. This meeting is over, Ju Hyung said. The man laughed nervously. Over? We haven't signed the territory agreement. You need this deal. I needed a partner, Ju Hyung corrected, his hand resting on the back of the man's chair. But you have insulted a guest in my home, and that shows a lack of discipline I cannot tolerate. She's a maid, the man sputtered, standing up. You're throwing away millions for a maid? Get out, Ju Hyung said, before I decide to take more than just the deal off the table. The threat hung heavy in the air. The men scrambled to collect their papers, shooting confused glances at me. The offender glared, but he left. When the elevator doors closed, the silence returned. Ju Hyung didn't look at me for gratitude. He just picked up his glass of whiskey, walked to the window, and took a drink. He had just burned a fortune to defend my dignity, and he didn't even ask for a thank you. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 48 hours finally vanished, leaving a cold, hollow space where my courage used to be. My body realized it was safe before my mind did, and that disconnect was terrifying. I went to bed early, the luxury of the high thread count sheets feeling alien against my skin. I closed my eyes, hoping for oblivion. Instead, I got Ryan. The nightmare was always the same. I was back in the apartment, fumbling with the lock, my keys slipping through sweaty fingers. I could hear his heavy boots coming up the stairs, slower this time, deliberate. The door would jam, and just as the handle turned from the other side, the wood would splinter inward. I woke up screaming. It wasn't a whimper. It was a full-throated cry of pure terror that ripped through the silence of the penthouse. I sat up, gasping for air, clutching the duvet to my chest, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. The room was dark, but the door burst open with a violence that made me flinch. Ju Hyung stood there. He was silhouetted against the hallway light, a gun raised in his right hand. He swept the room in a single, fluid motion, the barrel tracking for a threat that didn't exist. He was lethal, focused, and ready to kill whatever had made me scream. When he saw the empty room, the gun lowered slightly. He looked at me, sweating, shaking, eyes wide with panic. He didn't say everything was okay. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He understood instantly that the attacker was in my head. He holstered the weapon at the small of his back and walked into the room. I expected him to leave now that the danger was gone, but he didn't. He pulled the heavy velvet armchair from the corner, dragged it to the foot of my bed, and sat down. Sleep, he said into the dark. I will watch. He didn't touch me. He didn't try to fix me. He just sat there, a silent sentinel in the shadows, guarding me from my own memories. For the first time in 2 years, I closed my eyes and didn't see Ryan. I saw the outline of a man who would burn the world down just to let me rest. If you think he's catching feelings, you are wrong. He is catching a war. Hit that subscribe button right now, because in the next chapter, a woman from his past arrives to prove that I am the mistake that will get him killed. The peace I found in the dark vanished the moment the sun came up. I woke up alone. The chair at the foot of my bed was empty, returned to its corner. It felt like a fever dream, except for the lingering scent of sandalwood and gun oil that hung in the air. I wanted to believe I belonged here, but the elevator doors opened an hour later to remind me that I didn't. I was in the kitchen, awkwardly drinking coffee, when she walked in. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like a magazine cover. She was Korean, tall, and dressed in a cream-colored power suit that cost more than my entire life's earnings. Her hair was a sleek curtain of black silk, and her heels clicked on the marble with a rhythm that sounded like gunfire. This was Minji. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew her type. She was part of his world. She stopped when she saw me. She didn't look surprised. She looked bored. Her eyes swept over my oversized t-shirt and bare feet, assessing me like I was a stain on the rug that the cleaners had missed. So, she said, her English flawless but clipped. You are the stray. I set my mug down, my hand trembling slightly. I'm Tanisha. I didn't ask for a name, she replied, walking past me to the fridge as if I were invisible. She grabbed a bottle of sparkling water. Names imply importance. You are a complication. Mr. Ju Hyung invited me to stay, I said, trying to summon the courage I had felt the night before. Minji turned, leaning against the counter. Her smile was sharp, devoid of humor. Ju Hyong collects things. Rare art, vintage wines, and apparently, broken women with baggage. She took a sip, her eyes locking onto mine. Do you know what happens to men in his position when they get distracted? They get sloppy, and then they get dead. The words hit me like a physical slap. It was my deepest fear voiced aloud. I'm not a distraction, I whispered. You are a target, she corrected coldly. And by keeping you here, he has painted a target on his own back. You think this is a romance novel? This is business. And you are bad for business. She pushed off the counter and walked toward the study, leaving me standing there. The worst part wasn't her cruelty. The worst part was that deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I had a sickening feeling that she was absolutely right. I had one secret I hadn't given up. When Ju Hyong demanded my phone on that first night, I gave him the one Ryan tracked. But in the bottom of my runaway bag, taped inside a box of tampons where no man would ever look, was a cheap burner phone. It was my lifeline, my backup plan for when the world fell apart. I hadn't turned it on in days, terrified the signal alone would betray me. But Minji's words were like poison in my blood. You are a target. You will get him killed. I locked myself in the master bathroom, turning on the shower to mask the sound of my terror. My hands shook so badly I dropped the battery twice before sliding it in. The screen flickered to life. One new message. Sent 3 minutes ago. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a curse word. It was a picture. The air left my lungs. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance, but the subject was undeniable. It was my younger sister, Maya. She was standing at the bus stop near her university, laughing at something on her phone. She was wearing the red scarf I had knitted for her last Christmas. The text below, it was simple. She looks cold. Tanisha. Should I offer her a ride? I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream. Ryan wasn't just hunting me anymore. He had widened the net. He knew I was out of reach, so he was going for the only thing in the world I loved more than my own survival. Minji was right. I was a disease. I had brought this infection into a fortress, and now it was spilling out onto the innocent. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't hide behind Ju Hyon's expensive security while Ryan hurt Maya to get my attention. I turned the phone off and ripped the battery out. I didn't cry. There was no time for tears. I moved with the frantic energy of a woman with nothing left to lose. I grabbed a tote bag and shoved my basics into it, a spare uniform, the cash I had hidden, and a bottle of water. I couldn't take the main elevator. The security team watched that like hawks. But I knew this building. I knew the service elevator and the pantry that the caterers used. I crept through the penthouse. It was midnight. The hallway was silent. I moved like the ghost I was trained to be, avoiding the floorboards I knew would creak. My heart was thumping against my ribs so hard I thought it would wake the house. I reached the pantry door and pushed it open. The service elevator was there, its call button glowing a faint, inviting red. I pressed it. I waited. The hum of the machinery sounded like a siren in the quiet dark. The doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped forward, relief flooding through me. I was leaving. I was going to save Maya. I was going to end this. But as the steel doors parted fully, I didn't see the empty car. I saw shoes. Expensive, black leather shoes. My gaze traveled up past the sharp crease of dark trousers, past the white dress shirt with the top button undone, all the way to the face of the man who owned the building. Ju Hyong was standing inside the elevator. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't sleeping. He was waiting. Pause the video. Does he know about the text? Is he going to punish her for running? Or does he have a darker reason for blocking her exit? If you want to know the real price of leaving the Mafia, keep watching. The bag slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a heavy thud. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The elevator doors tried to close, but Ju Hyong put a hand out, holding them open with effortless strength. He stepped out into the pantry, forcing me to back up until my spine hit the shelving unit behind me. Going somewhere, he asked. His voice was terrifyingly soft. It wasn't the roar of a monster. It was the quiet click of a trap snapping shut. I have to go. I choked out, tears finally spilling over. Please, step aside. You don't understand. I understand that you are disobeying a direct order, he said, looming over me. I understand that you are trying to sneak out of the safest place in the city to run back into the gutter. It's not about me. I screamed, the panic breaking through my fear of him. I scrambled for the burner phone in my pocket, my hands shaking violently. I shoved it toward him. Look at what he sent me. Ju Hyong didn't take the phone. He didn't even glance at the grainy picture of Maya. He just looked at me, his expression shifting from cold authority to something that looked disturbingly like disappointment. "You think I am blind?" he asked. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a sleek tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it toward me. I froze. It was a live video feed. It showed Maya's dorm room. She was sitting at her desk, studying. But that wasn't what stopped my heart. Outside her window, parked on the street below, was a black sedan. And standing by the entrance of her building was a man in a gray suit, the same massive guard who had retrieved my boxes. "I deployed a detail to your sister's university 3 hours ago," Ju Hyong said calmly. "The moment that man's car was spotted within 2 miles of her campus, my team was active." I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to catch up. You knew. "I know everything that touches my property," he said, lowering the tablet. "I knew about the burner phone you hid. I knew about the text before you even read it. I was waiting to see if you would trust me to handle it." He stepped closer, invading my space, consuming the air in the room. He reached out and wiped a tear from my chin with his thumb. "You failed the test, Tanisha. You tried to run instead of coming to me. I wanted to protect her," I whispered, shame washing over me. "You cannot protect anyone," he stated, his voice dropping to a rumble. "You are the one who needs protection. Ryan is not hunting you anymore. He is hunting us. And you almost walked right out those doors and handed yourself to him." He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "Never try to leave me again." I had spent 2 years trying to be invisible, wearing uniforms that blended into the beige walls. But that night, Ju Hyong decided invisibility was no longer an option. He didn't ask me to get dressed. He had a team of stylists descend on the guest suite like a swarm of silent locusts. When they were finished, the woman in the mirror was a stranger. She wore emerald silk that clung to her curves like a second skin, and her hair was swept up to reveal the diamond necklace cold against her throat. "You are not cleaning tonight," Ju Hyong said when I stepped into the foyer. He wore a tuxedo that made him look like a prince of darkness. "Tonight, you are the statement I am making to the city." We arrived at the Gala of Commerce, a polite name for a gathering of sharks in expensive suits. The cameras flashed like lightning storms, blinding me. I instinctively reached for his arm, and he didn't pull away. He locked his elbow against his side, trapping my hand there. It was a message to everyone watching. She is with me. Inside, the ballroom was suffocating. Minji was there, holding a champagne flute, surrounded by older men with hard eyes. When she saw us, she glided over, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "A bold choice," she said to Ju Hyong, then turned to me. "Try not to use the salad fork for the fish, dear. It confuses the waiters." She wanted me to crumble. She wanted the maid to panic. But she forgot something important. I had cleaned up after parties like this for years. I knew more about their etiquette than they did because I was the one who washed the dishes they dirted. "Actually," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "that's a melon fork. The fish service hasn't started yet because the vintage they're pouring needs 10 more minutes to breathe." Minji's smile faltered. The older man next to her chuckled, looking at me with new interest. Ju Hyong didn't smile, but I felt his arm tighten against mine. It was a pulse of approval. For an hour, I wasn't the victim. I was the consort of the most powerful man in the room. But while I was sipping sparkling water and pretending to be safe, the signal was traveling. Miles away, in a dingy motel room that smelled of stale beer, a television flickered. Ryan was sitting on the edge of the mattress, a bottle in his hand. He wasn't looking for me anymore. He had given up on finding me at friends' houses. But then, the news cut to the red carpet footage. He saw the flash of emerald green. He saw the face he had bruised just a week ago, now flawless and laughing at the side of a king. He stood up, the bottle smashing onto the floor. He didn't scream. He walked to the mirror and smiled. It was the smile of a man who just realized he held the winning lottery ticket. I wasn't just his ex-girlfriend anymore. I was the weakness of a god, and he knew exactly how to sell that information to the highest bidder. The betrayal didn't happen with a gunshot. It happened with a handshake. Ryan didn't go to the police. He knew they wouldn't care. Instead, he went to the Dragon Club, a place everyone in the neighborhood knew to avoid. He walked right up to the heavy steel doors and told the bouncer he had something the boss, a man named Mr. Kong, would want to buy. Inside the smoky back room, Mr. Kong laughed when Ryan sat down. "You waste my time, boy. You are a nobody." "I'm a nobody who knows the floor plan of Ju Hyong's penthouse," Ryan said. slamming his hand on the table. Mr. Kong stopped laughing. The penthouse is a fortress. No one knows the layout except his security. And his maid, Ryan countered. He pulled out his phone. He didn't have spy documents. He had something worse. He had my old complaints. For 2 years, I had texted Ryan about my date event. I had sent messages like, "The service elevator in the pantry is so slow, and the motion sensors in the east hallway are broken again, so I have to vacuum in the dark." I thought I was just complaining about my job. I didn't realize I was drawing a map for an invasion. Ryan scrolled through the texts, reading them aloud. "She cleans the panic room on Thursdays. She told me the ventilation shaft runs behind the master closet. She told me the code to the staff entrance because she kept forgetting it." Mr. Kong leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with greed. This wasn't just information. This was a key to the city. And the girl? Does she matter to him? He took her to the gala. Ryan spat, the jealousy making his voice ugly. He stood in front of cameras with her. "She isn't just the help. She's his soft spot." Mr. Kong smiled. "A soft spot is a fatal wound waiting to happen." Back at the penthouse, the air changed. The warmth from the gala had evaporated. Zhu Haiyang stood by the window, staring out at the skyline, his back rigid. He didn't look at me when I entered the room. He was checking his phone, then checking the perimeter monitors. "Is something wrong?" I asked, feeling a cold draft that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He turned. His eyes were dark, distant. The connection we had built on the red carpet was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating look of a general preparing for a siege. "Go to your room, Tanisha," he said quietly, "and lock the door." He sensed it. He didn't know how, and he didn't know who, but a predator knows when the wind shifts. The storm was coming, and I had unknowingly opened the gate. The darkness didn't fall slowly. It slammed shut like a coffin lid. It happened exactly 30 minutes after Zhu Haiyang left. He had received a call, a frantic report about a fire at his main warehouse. He hadn't wanted to go. I saw the hesitation in his hand as he reached for his keys. He looked at me, then at the door, sensing that the timing was too convenient. But a boss cannot let his kingdom burn, so he left 3 extra guards at the door and told me to stay in the bedroom. He didn't know the fire was a lie. He didn't know the threat wasn't at the warehouse. It was right here, buried in the electrical grid of the building. I was reading a book when the power died. The lights didn't flicker, they just vanished. The gentle hum of the air conditioning stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed against my ears. Then, the electronic locks on the penthouse doors disengaged with a loud, mechanical clunk. My heart stopped. I knew that sound. I scrambled off the bed, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. I moved to the window. The rest of the city was bright, glittering with life. Only the top floor of the skyrise tower was pitch black. I reached for the house phone. Deadline. I reached for the panic button on the wall. Nothing. Then I heard it, the faint chime of the service elevator in the pantry. The same elevator I used to complain to Ryan about. The one I told him had a faulty sensor that didn't trigger the security alarm if you held the door open button for 10 seconds. I felt sick. Physically sick. I had handed them the key. I didn't run to the main door. I knew men would be coming through there any second. I needed to disappear. I knew this apartment better than anyone because I was the one who cleaned the corners nobody looked at. I ran to the master closet. Inside, behind the rows of Zhu Haiyang's immaculate suits, was a narrow access panel for the plumbing. It was tight, dusty, and dark. I squeezed inside, pulling the panel shut just as the heavy front doors were kicked open. Flashlight beams sliced through the bedroom, cutting up the dark. I held my breath, my hands clamped over my mouth. I could hear heavy boots on the floor. I could hear the Velcro of tactical vests. "Clear the room," a voice whispered. It was professional, cold. But then I heard another voice, a voice that made my blood freeze in my veins. It was high-pitched, excited, and erratic. "She's here," Ryan said, his voice echoing in the empty suite. "I can smell her cheap perfume. Find her. Mr. Kong said I get to keep her if we find the safe first." I squeezed my eyes shut. I wasn't Tanisha the nursing student anymore. I wasn't the maid. I was prey, hiding in the walls, listening to the man I once loved hunting me down like an animal. I held my breath until my lungs burned, listening to them tear the room apart. They weren't looking for a person. They were looking for a prize. I heard glass shattering as they knocked over Zhu Haiyang's cologne bottles. I heard the mattress being flipped. They were destroying the sanctuary I had started to call home. "She's not in here," One of the mercenaries grunted. Check the terrace. Their footsteps faded toward the balcony. This was my chance. I knew the panic room was located behind the false wall in the study, down the hall. If I could make it there, I would be safe inside a steel box that even explosives couldn't open. I pushed the access panel open and crawled out. The air was thick with dust. I stayed low, crawling on my hands and knees across the carpet, moving toward the hallway. I reached the doorframe and peeked out. The corridor was empty. I stood up and sprinted. My bare feet slapped against the marble. I made it to the study door. I was 5 steps away from the bookshelf that hid the panel. Gotcha! A hand shot out from the shadows of the living room, grabbing my hair. I screamed as I was yanked backward, my feet leaving the ground. I slammed into a hard chest, the smell of stale beer and sweat filling my nose. Ryan. He spun me around, shoving me against the heavy oak desk. He looked wild. His eyes were bloodshot, his grin manic. He was wearing a leather jacket that looked too expensive for him, probably bought with the money Mr. Khan gave him for selling me out. Did you think you could upgrade? He spat, leaning his weight against me to pin me down. You think because you sleep in silk sheets now, you're better than me? Let me go. I gasped, clawing at his arms. You belong in the dirt, Tanisha, he screamed. He raised his hand and struck me. His fist connected with the same cheekbone he had broken weeks ago. The pain was blinding. It exploded behind my eyes, white-hot and sickening. I tasted blood, but something strange happened. The pain didn't make me cower this time. It woke me up. It was the same pain I had felt for 2 years, and I was done feeling it. As he pulled his arm back to hit me again, my hand scrambled blindly across the desk. My fingers closed around something cold and heavy, Ju Hyong's steel letter opener. It was sharp, lethal, and waited for balance. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I swung it with every ounce of rage I had suppressed. The metal sank into Ryan's shoulder. He howled, releasing me and stumbling back. He looked at the handle sticking out of his jacket in shock. He looked at me, and for the first time in our history, he was the one who looked afraid. You crazy. I didn't wait for him to finish. I turned and lunged for the bookshelf. I pulled the hidden lever. The wall groaned and slid open, revealing the heavy steel door of the panic room. Get her! Ryan screamed to the other men, who were now running down the hall. I threw myself inside. I hit the red button on the wall just as Ryan's hand reached the threshold. The steel door slammed shut with a thunderous boom, severing his reach. I locked it. I slid down the cold metal wall, clutching my bleeding face. I was trapped in a box. I was hurt, but as I looked at the security monitors flickering to life on the wall, showing Ryan pounding uselessly on the door outside, I started to laugh. It was a broken, sobbing sound, but it was real. I had fought back. I sat on the cold steel floor, hugging my knees, my eyes glued to the grainy black and white monitors. On the screen, the hallway was a silent movie of chaos. Ryan was shouting at the wall, kicking the reinforced door until he was limping. Behind him, the 3 mercenaries were tearing paintings off the walls, looking for a safe that didn't exist. They were angry. They were sloppy. They thought they had won. Then, the world outside the box exploded. It wasn't a sound I heard through the thick steel. It was a vibration that rattled my teeth. On the monitor, the heavy double doors at the end of the hallway didn't just open. They disintegrated. Wood and metal sprayed inward like shrapnel. Through the smoke, a shadow emerged. Ju Hyong didn't run. He walked. He moved with a terrifying, fluid grace that made the mercenaries look like clumsy children. He held a handgun in his right hand, keeping it low. The first mercenary raised his rifle, but he was too slow. Ju Hyong fired once. The man dropped. It was clinical. It was efficient. It was the work of a man who had done this 1,000 times. The second mercenary charged. Ju Hyong didn't fire again. He holstered the gun in a blur of motion and stepped inside the man's guard. I watched, breathless, as he grabbed the man's tactical vest, used the man's own momentum to spin him, and drove him face first into the marble wall. The mercenary slumped to the floor and didn't move. The third man ran. He dropped his weapon and scrambled toward the shattered entrance. Ju Hyong didn't chase him. He just watched him go, knowing his security team downstairs would handle the rest. That left Ryan. Ryan froze. He was standing by the panic room door, the letter opener still sticking out of his shoulder. He turned slowly to face the man he had stolen from. On the small screen, I saw Ryan's face crumble. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the primal fear of a prey animal realizing it is trapped in a cage with a tiger. Zhu Haiyang stopped 10 feet away. He looked at the wreckage of his home. Then he looked at Ryan. He didn't yell. He didn't ask questions. He just started walking forward, closing the distance. Ryan pulled a knife from his belt, a pathetic, shaky gesture. "Stay back," he screamed. Though I couldn't hear the words, I could read his lips. "I'll kill her. I know the codes." Zhu Haiyang stopped. He looked at the panic room camera. He looked right at me. His eyes were burning with a cold, blue fire. He knew I was watching. He knew I was safe. And he knew exactly what needed to happen next to ensure I never felt fear again. Pause right here. This is the moment. The gun is holstered. The guards are gone. It is just the king and the rat. If you believe that a man who hurts women deserves exactly what is coming to him, hit subscribe. We are about to witness the price of admission. Zhu Haiyang reached up and slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket. He took it off and dropped it on the floor. Then, with agonizing slowness, he pulled off his black leather gloves, finger by finger. He dropped them on top of the jacket. He rolled up his white sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He wasn't going to shoot Ryan. A bullet was too quick. A bullet was too impersonal. He raised his bare hands, curled them into fists, and signaled for Ryan to come. Ryan lunged, screaming. Zhu Haiyang caught his wrist midair. He twisted it until I saw the bone snap on the screen. Ryan fell to his knees, his mouth open in a silent scream of agony. Zhu Haiyang didn't let go. He pulled Ryan back up to his feet, looked him dead in the eye, and delivered the first punch. It was a punishment. It was a sentence. And he was just getting started. The violence on the screen was hard to watch, but I couldn't look away. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Zhu Haiyang took apart Ryan's ego, then his courage, and finally his body. He mirrored every bruise Ryan had ever left on me. A strike to the rib, a blow to the jaw. When Ryan finally collapsed, he didn't get back up. He just lay there, a broken heap on the expensive rug, wheezing through a ruined nose. Zhu Haiyang stood over him for a long moment, his chest heaving slightly. He wiped a speck of blood from his knuckles onto his pants. Then, he turned his back on the body and walked toward the hidden wall. The keypad beeped. The heavy hydraulic hiss of the door unsealing filled the small box. I scrambled back as the steel wall slid open. The bright light of the hallway flooded in, blinding me. Zhu Haiyang stood in the opening. His shirt was splattered with red. His hair was messy. He looked terrifying, wild, and dangerous. But when his eyes found mine, the violence evaporated. He saw the blood on my cheek where Ryan had hit me. His jaw clenched so hard I thought a tooth might crack. He stepped into the panic room, dropping to one knee in front of me. He didn't care about the mess. He didn't care about the dead mercenaries in his hallway. "Tanisha," he breathed, his voice rough, like gravel grinding together. I flinched as he reached out, expecting the anger of a man who had lost control. But his hand was gentle. His thumb grazed my jawline, avoiding the bruise, shaking slightly. I used the letter opener. I whispered, pointing to Ryan. I fought back. "I know," he said softly. "I saw." He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. The smell of him, sweat, iron, and sandalwood, filled my lungs. It grounded me. "You are done bleeding for others," he said, the words low and final. "You are done hiding. From this moment on, you are mine. Under my name. Under my protection. Anyone who touches you, touches me." He scooped me up into his arms, lifting me as if I weighed nothing. He carried me out of the box, stepping right over Ryan's unconscious body without even looking down. 2 guards were already waiting in the hall. They looked at Ryan, then at Zhu Haiyang. "Take the trash out," Zhu Haiyang ordered, his voice icy. "Make sure he never finds his way back to this city. Or any city." He didn't wait for an answer. He carried me toward the bedroom, leaving the wreckage of my past behind us on the floor. I buried my face in his neck and finally, for the first time in my life, I let go. It has been exactly 60 days since I last wore a maid's uniform. 60 days since I last checked the locks 3 times before sleeping. The ugly purple bruises are gone now, faded into distant memory, leaving behind skin that finally looks like mine again. I sat at the vanity, the same massive mirror where I used to desperately hide my black eye with layers of cheap concealer. Today, the only thing touching my face is the warm morning sun. My nursing textbooks are stacked high on the desk next to a vase of fresh white peonies. Zhu Haiyang insists I finish my degree. He says a queen should have her own power, even if he provides the castle to keep her safe. The penthouse feels different now. It is not silent or cold like a museum anymore. There is jazz playing softly from the hidden speakers, and the rich smell of roasted coffee fills the air. Coffee I did not have to make for anyone but myself. I watched him in the reflection as he walked into the room. He was buttoning his cuffs, that familiar, lethal grace still present in every precise movement. But when he saw me, the hardness in his dark eyes melted instantly. He did not say a word. He just walked over, placed his large hands on my shoulders, and kissed the top of my head. It was not a claim of ownership anymore. It was a silent vow. "The car is waiting downstairs," he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "Do not be late for your class." "I won't," I smiled, leaning back against his chest. I used to think safety was just the absence of pain. I was wrong. Safety is the freedom to breathe without shaking. I looked at the man who had walked into fire to pull me out, and I realized I was not a kept woman. I was a cherished one. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living the life I deserved. Drop a comment with your current time right now. I want to know who stayed with us until the very end. Which chapter broke you the most? Let me know below. And if you think this story was intense, you haven't seen anything yet. Next week, a rival boss walks into an ER bleeding out, and the only doctor who can save him is the woman he swore to destroy. Click the bell so you don't miss it.